Now, employees, have they made money from Anthropic yet? Have there been a rush of expensive home buying in San Francisco yet?
I've heard it's very hard to get a home in San Francisco right now. There are like 3-bedroom places going for like 2 million over asking.
I'm so glad I don't live there. But they did have a secondary, and I thought very few people took them up on it, right?
There have been multiple opportunities to cash out for employees. OpenAI had permitted 600 current and former employees to cash out up to 30 million each in a landmark 6.6 billion secondary share set. Dude, that is such a big number, 6.6 billion. I had heard anecdotally that 75 people hit that $30 million threshold.
That's a nice paycheck. Now, so compare that to Anthropic, and they did have a secondary transaction that I believe launched in like February of this year and
Yeah.
wrapped up in April. They were targeting 5 to 6 billion in capital that employees could cash out, but the valuation at the time was 350 billion.
It's almost tripled.
Yeah, if you're one of those employees and you cashed out in like March, April, 350 billion valuation, you were probably celebrating for like a day. And now you're like, maybe that wasn't such a good idea.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And that's like, there's been all this news about the SPVs that weren't actually board approved SPVs. And like, what is the game theory of like, if they're not approved, like as the employee, like do you just give them enough cash to make up for it, like whatever they missed out at, but then like you get to keep the upside, like how will that work? And so the valuations are moving so fast. This is like the only time in history really that I can remember that it's like you're kicking yourself for taking the secondary.
So you think a lot of employees aren't taking up the formal secondary, but they are finding other buyers for their shares at different valuations?
Yeah, above that.
Very interesting. But then now, all right, so if Anthropic, they did confidentially file for IPO. If they go public in a few months, how quickly will the employees have liquidity? So if they've waited, how long is it going to take before they can actually sell their shares in the public market?
So just to take a step back, you always hear about companies filing for IPO in two waves. The first one is like Anthropic has confidentially filed for IPO. It's not confidential, like we aren't supposed to know about this. Like that's public. Like they made an announcement. It's not confidential in that sense. The numbers are confidential and the contents of the filing are confidential. And that's because the SEC gets a chance to give them comments on it to say like, hey, you're talking about your net dollar retention rate, but like you don't actually give the number anywhere. Or you don't have like a great bridge on your adjusted EBITDA here. Like you need to put that in, or you cannot credibly make that claim to the public. And so it's basically like a draft. That's what it means. And then what usually happens 6 to 8 weeks after, if they want to release it and they are planning to IPO, is that they will have quote unquote blessed filing, but it won't have the number of shares up yet and it won't have the price. Those go in at the very last moment, right before it goes live. So in that sense, actually, there are 3 different waves of like having this filed.
When's the roadshow happening and when's the quiet period in that process?
The roadshow usually happens 6 weeks before the IPO, but you have to have this filed before you start the roadshow.
When's the quiet period?
Quiet period. I would think they're in the quiet period now then. I don't know. I don't actually know that.
All right. I am asking the AI overview on Google. An IPO quiet period has 2 main phases. It begins the moment a company officially starts its registration process with the SEC and ends 40 days after the stock begins trading.
Got it. Yeah, it must be because Krishna, their CFO, just went on Invest Like the Best last week. So it's like, perfect timing. Got it in right before he filed. You got to chunk that.
Yeah, they probably did a wave of publicity.
But back to your question, when can the employees sell their shares? Typically 180 days or 6 months after they go public. So that's why there was such like the uproar over like Figma's amazing stock pop on day one, but it's like the employees are sitting there and they can't do anything about it, right? And then by the time the lockup ends, it's at 20% of what it was at before. So that's what can make it like a difficult conversation. And like, you can kind of see it from both ends, right? Like if you're Anthropic, you don't want the top AI engineers to just walk on day one, right? That's not good for anybody. But on the other hand, you're like, if you look at, I think it's 14 of the last 18 IPOs, by the time the lockup expires, the shares are below what they listed at.
We'll have to stay tuned to see if these employees made the right call. I suspect they did by walking away at this $350 billion valuation, but a lot can happen between now and, 6 to 12 months from now. CJ, we talked about investors. We now talked about employees. What about the bankers? How much are the bankers going to make and how are they getting paid here?
So the bankers typically will make between 3 and 5% of the total amount that you're selling, which includes both primary and secondary shares that are exchanging hands. So there may be early investors that they're helping to get to sell. There may be CEOs and founders who are going to sell and they don't have to wait with the rest of the employees. And so it's any amount that's being put up to float on the market, including what they call the green shoe, which can happen afterwards to help stabilize the stock price by selling more. It's usually around 3 to 5%, and it goes down the more you offer. So like if you're only doing an IPO for to raise like 200 million, you're probably going to get a larger fee. But if it's like $1 billion, they're going to probably only have to pay 1%, right? Like I bet SpaceX, I bet their IPO, I bet the total fees are 1% or less rather than like a typical 5%. But if you're raising 500 million, you're probably going to pay 4 to 5%. That's the average. And that's split, by the way, amongst all the underwriters.
All right, so stack rank for me. Would you rather be an Anthropic employee, an investor like Altimeter, or the banker?
I'd rather be the investor because I'm getting in at a discount without having to do 4 years of service there. And the banker is a great job on this particular like company, but at the same time, it's true outcome-based pricing. It is a sure thing, but it isn't a sure thing in terms of what the final price will be. I think I would rather be the investors buying in the most recent Series H.
This is a lot of pressure for the bankers to get this right. I just have to say, I would want to be an employee. Anthropic just seems to be a pretty cool place to work. These employees are going to be worth a lot, and then they're going to be able to go on and do incredible things after Anthropic.
This is going to be like the equivalent of having Harvard on your resume.
Better than Harvard. I don't know what's better than Harvard, but
It's Anthropic.
this would be like you're in a secret society at Harvard.
Yeah, you graduated top of your class at Harvard with like 5 degrees. We were talking about this in a prior podcast too. Like even if you were just like a middle of the road person there.
Yeah, even if you're like staff engineer, although nowadays you could be the former CTO of Workday and be a staff engineer, or no, member of technical staff.
Oh, I wanted to point out one difference though for how the bankers are paid, Kyle, if I can. So bankers also get paid on M&A transactions. IPOs are fundamentally a fundraise. For an M&A transaction, that is also truly outcome-based pricing. It's like having a realtor and you're like, hey, I'm going to give you 5% to sell my house. You guys split it between buyer and seller. Usually for an M&A transaction, it's something between 1.5 and 3% of the total transaction volume, which you'll notice that's a lower percentage than I cited for the IPO. The difference is typically only one bank will work on the M&A transaction, which means they get all of it. So while it's a smaller percentage, it can be a larger pot of money because there are fewer banks who get paid.
Well, that does remind me, I feel like a lot of companies file to go public and then they get acquired, during that period. What are the odds that Anthropic gets acquired? Is there anyone who has the pockets deep enough to buy them?
There's quite literally, yeah, they have one path. That's like the funny thing. I remember like some of the COVID era companies, like you start to say these valuations are getting so big, like your only universe of acquirers are Google and Google. Like nobody could afford Anthropic. I think it would be impossible.
When I looked to set up my first CRM at Growth Unhinged, I knew I wanted something that was actually AI first. The world has evolved. Most CRMs are still stuck in the 90s. I found Lightfield, the CRM that remembers everything and does the work for you. It joins all my sales calls, reads my emails, and has the full context on every account. At this point, Lightfield knows my deals better than I do. I haven't had to set up a single CRM dashboard. Instead, I simply ask Lightfield questions like, which deals in my pipeline are most likely to close, or who do I need to follow up with today? It even automatically prepares me for meetings with a personalized daily briefing, and setup was quick and surprisingly painless. Lightfield is my sales coach, RevOps analyst, therapist, EA, all in one. See Lightfield for yourself with a 14-day free trial. Connecting data from your inbox takes just 5 minutes, and you can migrate in under an hour. Go to lightfield.app, that's LIGHTFIELD.app, and use code MOSTLYGROWTH to get 3 months free.